Hi, I'm Melissa, and I have a story about a beloved bootlegger.
My name is Darren, and I have a story about the connection between smuggling liquor and a popular children's activity.
Hi, I'm Drew, and I have a story about some unlikely allies to the bootleggers during Prohibition.
How will all of these stories tie into Bootleg? Find out in this episode of History Bluffs. Welcome to another episode of History Bluffs. It's where truth is stranger than fiction. And now I want to welcome to the stage, it's your host, Chris.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Thank you, Adam. Everyone give it up for our tech extraordinaire, Adam.
Hey, thank you very much. Glad to be here supporting you with the sights and the sounds. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Adam. Adam is the engine of the show, making everything run. He is going to be adding some sound effects and some visual effects you'll see here throughout the course of the show. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of History Bluffs. Yes, Adam is there. Just get himself the woof whistle, apparently.
Hey.
So let's meet. We have a great show for you tonight, inspired by the word bootleg, as Adam said in the opening. The way that the show works, for those of you watching on YouTube or our other channels or listening to us on the podcast, we have three historians who I'll introduce momentarily. And each of them are going to regale us with a story inspired by the word bootleg. Two of them will be telling true stories. One will be bluffing. I'll get into that in a second as we put up the...
Bluffing? As
Bluffing.
per the titular... The titular? Is that how you say that?
The titular, yes.
The title of the show is History Bluffs. Someone
Correct.
will be bluffing.
Someone will be bluffing indeed. And let's meet who... the three people who one of them will be bluffing. Let's bring out our three historians. And I'm going to... Yes. Welcome. I'll start with Melissa. Hello, Melissa. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, happy to be here.
All right. How are you doing today? And let's see. Bootleg. I don't think I'm going to impinge on anyone's story tonight based on your opening. I have no idea what you guys are going to talk about, but based on your opening salvos there, one of the things that I think of when I think of bootleg is when I was growing up, bootleg albums. People would get these, home recordings, if you will, of typically it happened live at concert, that you get a bootleg. So anything like that in your world, Melissa, your universe, where you got a pre-release sample of something that you shouldn't have had your hands on yet?
Yeah, I think probably for me it was all the digital download stuff with before iPods there was like Zunes were a really big thing for a little bit.
Wow, the Microsoft Zune.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, it cost a lot of money to get each song you wanted, and then so I found bad recordings online.
Yes. Well, welcome back to the show. Our second historian tonight is Darren. Hello, Darren.
Hello, Chris.
And Darren, what about you? When you think of bootleg music, anything pop into your head?
I think my first car was probably a bootleg of some sort of what we call automobiles today.
Was it a Pinto? Like, what was it?
Well, not my first car, but I think my second car was an AMC Gremlin.
Oh, wow. The
Yeah.
Gremlin.
The Gremlin,
Oh, my
yeah.
God. I remember
Right.
those.
All right. And our third historian is Drew. Welcome, Drew. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
The Drew man.
The Drew, indeed. So, Drew, what about you with respect to bootleg music? What does that make you think of?
I may be misremembering the name, but you guys, was there like the guys that did like prank phone calls, the Jerky Boys?
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I never really was into them, and I didn't have any of my own, but I remember somebody at school had it, and it was very like secretive, and you couldn't be caught with it, and like around the locker room to listen to these guys, and they were vulgar and stuff. But I remember that, copies of copies were spread around the school.
Isn't that amazing? There was a group of those kind of guys, I think, at every school in America. It's like, where did they get that? They must be in a union. They must have been in a union.
It's the union of bootleggers.
Yes. So, welcome to all three of you. Melissa, Darren, and Drew will be our historians. And Adam, let's tell the folks what's going to happen. Would you mind bringing up the rules?
You got it. It's a game show, so let's show everyone some rules to go over. If you can't see them because you're an audio listener, Chris will read them for you.
I will indeed. So, as Adam mentioned, we have the rules. The historians are telling a story based on the word bootleg. That is the topic for tonight. So each of them are going to be inspired by the word bootleg. We have 3 historians. 2 of them are going to be telling true stories that are factual stories, and one of them will be bluffing. The bluffs, yes. The bluffs story will be a fictional premise. It could have some true facts in it, though. It could talk about some real places on Earth. It could talk about some real people who do or did exist. But the overall premise of the story will be false. And the one thing we ask of the audience is that you please do not use the internet to look up anyone's premise and debunk anyone during the course of the show. Save that, if you will, for the end, because after we have 3 rounds in the show, 3 rounds for each of them to tell their story. And at the end of the 3rd round, we will have an opportunity for everyone to make the guesses, because even I don't know who is the bluff.
That's right. You don't. I'm the only one with the knowledge.
Adam is the only one that knows. So I mentioned the 3 rounds. We're going to jump right in. We have 3 rounds, each of them getting successively shorter. The first round is 75 seconds. The second round is 60 seconds. And the third and concluding round is only 45 seconds for each of our 3 historians to wrap up their story. Indeed. Whoa. So, Adam, if you will, let's just get to it. Let's open up with round number 1.
Let's go to round number 1.
All right.
Here we are.
Round number 1, go ahead.
I was going to say, is a good time to showcase our technology to know where we are in the show.
Here it comes.
Here it comes.
There it is. The Round Tracker 9000 just appeared above my head.
That was so anticlimactic.
Yes, it was. So if you're watching, you see those 3 sets of 3 dots in each round. As those get filled in, after each person tells their story, we will fill up all 9 slots over the course of 3 rounds of our Round Tracker 9000. And then we'll know it's time to figure out who is tonight's bluff. So let us get Melissa to the main square. Melissa, you're going to go first. You have 75 seconds in round number 1. When you hear the boom and you see the sundial, the floor is yours.
So this is the story of Maggie Bailey, the so-called queen of mountain bootlegging. Maggie lived in a town called Clovertown, Kentucky, and this is a small area of Harlan County, which is a county that is actually still considered a moist county, which is basically a dry county, meaning that they cannot sell or buy alcohol except for in very, very small parts of the county. So Maggie was born in 1904 and started selling moonshine when she was just 17 years old. Now, she says that she got into the business to basically take care of her family. She's 1 out of 6 siblings, and she used the money that she made bootlegging to help her family. She got the money originally from somebody that she met as a waitress who gave her money to start the business. And pretty soon she was a monopoly in the area of bootlegging, of selling moonshine. But in 1941, the law actually caught up with her, and she was arrested, found with 150 gallons of moonshine, and sentenced to 2 years. But to hear what happens next, that is not the end of Maggie Bailey.
Interesting. All right. Let's hear from the others what they think of Melissa's opening round story. Darren, what did you think of Melissa's opening with Maggie Bailey?
I'd like to hear more about turn of the century Kentucky Shark Tank. I really think that's cool. You just go into a diner and people are like, here's money for your illegal enterprise. I want 7%.
It was easier.
All right. It was easier back then. Things were easier back then. Drew, what did you think of Maggie Bailey?
I'm curious to hear more, especially I always thought that Bailey invented Irish cream, not moonshine.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Good note there. Well, that is the comments we have so far from the other historians on Melissa's opening round. Now it's time to give her a chance to hear someone else and make her own opinion about whether they might be the bluff. So let's bring up Darren to the center. Darren, you have the main screen. You're going to see the sundial and you hear the boom, and you have 75 seconds.
Okay. If you are the rare football fan who is sober enough to comprehend the English language and watch football at the same time, you may have heard of the bootleg play. Technically, a bootleg is a play where the quarterback runs the ball towards either sideline behind the line of scrimmage. Bootleg sometimes includes a blocker, or it can be done without a blocker. Without a blocker, it's called a naked bootleg, or sometimes a waggle. The bootleg play was first created by one of the most famous football pioneers of all, Glenn Scobie Warner. We all know him better as Pop Warner. But when he was a kid, he was kind of chubby, and his nickname was Butter. At age 21, after he lost all of his money at the horse track, he enrolled in Cornell Law School. Then the oldest kid in class, he got the nickname Pop, which stuck better than Butter. It was while on the train to Cornell one day that Pop met Carl Johansson, Cornell's football coach. Johansson was actually impressed by Warner's hefty 200-pound weight and practically ordered him to attend football practice. Warner played guard for 3 years on the Cornell team, and then in 1894 he was named captain. And while the coach was out of town and he was captain, he left Pop Warner in charge of the team at age 23.
All right. So let's see here. Melissa, let's hear from you. So Glenn Scobie Warner, known as Butter, then changed his nickname to Pop. Is that corny to you?
It is a little corny, a little bit, but I feel like I'm not as much of a sports fan, so there are no flags on the play yet for me. So
okay.
Okay.
All right. Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, it's too bad he didn't change his name to Popcorn. Then he could have been Butter Popcorn.
yeah.
He could have kept both. But
Okay.
Popcorn was a bad dude.
Yeah, he had a fight with Orville.
Yeah. This all sounds very, very, very plausible at this point. Guys in law school starts teaching and coaching football. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's 2 of 3 so far.
Sounds
So,
delicious. That's what it
It
sounds.
does sound delicious. For those snacking, let's snack on another story for the first round as we get Drew up here. Drew, come on to the main square, and when you see the sundial and hear the boom, you have 75 seconds for your opening round.
Okay, so prohibition in the United States was 1920 to 1933. No production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol. It all was banned. This led to the rise of speakeasies and bootlegging operations across the country, with the mobsters out of New York and Chicago leading the way in outsmarting the law, giving the people what they wanted, and of course, making lots and lots of money. Well, today, let me tell you about a middle-aged couple from Kalamazoo, Michigan, who found themselves in the heart of the bootlegging business. Thomas and Emily Spencer operated a roadside inn and diner on their dairy farm in Kalamazoo called, quite simply, the Spencer Inn. They lived a simple life, went to church, were well respected in the community, and business at their inn and diner was okay, nothing big, but enough to get by, combined with the profits from the farm. Things changed one night in March 1923 during a blizzard. Around 11 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Standing there were 2 men from New York looking for a place to crash for the night. Although it was late, the Spencers had a room available, needed the money. They agreed to house them. The only odd request was that the men insisted on parking their car in their barn.
Okay. The old parking the barn in the car in the barn trick. Melissa, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I'm trying to distill this story down just a little bit. But it seems somewhat plausible. There are a couple of things that are sticking out, but I'll wait to see. I'll wait to see how this goes.
All right. Darren, what do you think?
I'm going to be quite surprised, or maybe unsurprised, if in round 2 we find out that these guys were in the barn catching the chickens by the tail, and that's how we came up with the term cocktail. I mean,
Oh man.
Well, Adam, if my math is correct above my head, yes, we have all 3 dots in round number 1 filled in. That means that we are moving on to round number 2.
Indeed, we are here at round number 2, Chris.
Welcome back to round number 2, everyone. And we are going to jump right back to the stories. Remember, folks, this round, the stories are 15 seconds shorter. So each historian only has 60 seconds in round number 2 to continue their stories. And Melissa will come right back to you and pick up where you left off with Maggie Bailey.
All right, so prison did not stop Maggie Bailey. In fact, she continued to be a bootlegger until she was at the age of 95. In fact, people would come into her house where she did her business and complain about different things going on in their lives. And she would just reply with, "I'm glad I'm just an old bootlegger." So she took a lot of pride actually in what she did. She did her dealings, like I said, out of her house, which was very modest and didn't even have working sewage until 1963. There were 2 swings out front for kids to play on. She kind of looked like a grandma. She wore shoes that were just tennis shoes, hair pulled back, very modest living. She did wear a uniform that was an old National Distillery Company uniform that somebody gave her. She never drank herself. She was never known to curse. She never even owned an automobile. But she knew her Fourth Amendment rights well. And that's where we'll leave off for this time.
Okay. All right. Darren, what did you think of Melissa's story?
Well, I was going to be upset. Like, if somebody came to my house while I was doing my business and started talking to me, that would make me upset. But then you said there wasn't even working plumbing until like the 1960s. So I don't know how she even did her business.
Well, yeah. Drew, what do you think about that, Drew?
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me was that Maggie never drank herself. And that's kind of like, yeah, you know, they say, like, you never trust a skinny chef. You shouldn't trust a sober moonshiner. So that's a red flag to me.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like a T-shirt you could sell in Moist Land in Kentucky there, right? All right, let's go to Darren. Darren, you're going to come up and you have 60 seconds.
Okay. It was during this time as both temporary coach and team captain that Pop Warner came up with his first original play. 3 backs who normally protected the rusher would fake a run to one side, while the quarterback kept the ball and would hand it to the runner, who now had an open field to run through on the other side. During the first in-game execution of this play, Warner himself carried the ball and was able to run clear for 25 yards. However, Warner played guard. He wasn't a runner, and so he held the ball wrong, and he fumbled upon being tackled. Despite that little fumble, the play worked, and it started Warner down a long path of creating inventive new offensive plays. Just 2 years later, he would become the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs and lead them to an undefeated season, even defeating famed John Heisman, who was coaching for Auburn at the time. Warner would go on to be a successful coach for many years, but it would take until 1927 for the bootleg play to make its first appearance on the field.
All right. Drew, what did you think of Darren's story?
Yeah, I really wish Darren had like a whiteboard to like be like they do on the in the locker room, like draw out the play, because that would have been very helpful. Because I'm trying to picture this as he's saying it. Otherwise, he mentions John Heisman. That's a real person. So these are all, everything sounds very plausible.
Yeah. And all right. And Melissa, what do you think?
My first thought was when he fumbled the ball. I think if I was around that area, wanted to be mean, I would change his name to Flop Warner. It's a dumb joke.
No, boy. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, dokey.
So, all right. Well, we are going to fulfill Drew's wish right here, because I do have a copy of Pop Warner's drawing on a whiteboard, but he kept going in different directions, so it ended up looking like this.
Oh, jeez.
No. All right. With that, we are going to have Drew come back out. And Drew, we need you to tell us your round 2 story. You have 60 seconds. The floor is yours.
Okay, so the following morning, Emily cooked the men a delicious country breakfast and even packed them a lunch for the road. The men were so grateful for the hospitality that they promised to come back and to recommend the inn to their friends. Now, if you look at a map of Kalamazoo, it sits in the southeast part of Michigan, about 2.5 hours from Detroit, 2.5 hours from Chicago, and it's not too far from Lake Michigan. The bootlegging operations used a variety of methods to transport alcohol. By land, drivers tried to avoid the main roads as much as possible. They also utilized the Great Lakes to transport by water, and they also would run shipments through Canada. So a place like Detroit was ideal for the New York Mafia to get their shipments from point A to point B and then move it to point C and beyond, which included Chicago. So the two men kept their word, and soon business was booming. Rum runners from New York stopped by frequently, sometimes to sleep, sometimes just to eat. More in round 3.
Okay. Melissa, what do you think of that update on the Spencer Inn?
So if Darren needs to have a whiteboard to show the plays, I think that Drew needs to have a map to show all of the places he just mentioned. That's what I think.
All right. Darren, what do you think?
I think it was very forward of them to be just delivering rum runners all the time.
Rum runners.
Yeah.
I love them. I love
They're
a rum
great. I mean, it sounds better than bathtub gin.
runner. Oh,
Yes.
ooh.
Well,
Never understood that. Okay.
Melissa, we spare no expense at the research here at History Bluffs. We do have a map from from Drew's story, and there it is.
Wow.
So,
The most helpful map I've ever seen.
amazingly, that is to scale. We are, speaking of scale, we are through 2 rounds of our stories so far. So that means that we have to move on to round number 3.
Let's do it. Round number 3.
Okay. So, welcome back to round number 3. When we last left off, we had Maggie Bailey didn't let prison stop her, and she was doing bootleg until 1995, until she was 95 years old. Pop Warner, he invented the naked bootleg, ran 25 yards and fumbled the ball. And the Spencers, with their Spencer Inn, they were attracting bootleggers from around the country, having breakfast at their camp outside Detroit. Let's find out what happens to all these stories in round number 3. We're going to bring Melissa back. Melissa, come on out. You now have 45 seconds to wrap up your concluding portion of your story. The floor is yours.
All right. In 1965, 9 troopers raid Maggie Bailey's home, and they find a lot of alcohol, and they also find $200,000 in like a locker, essentially. And so she ends up having a lot of legal issues. But the thing about Maggie Bailey was she was so beloved in the community that no jury ended up convicting her. She never went back to prison in all of her years of bootlegging, even though it was common knowledge that she was doing it. The reason why is she ended up using a lot of that money to help kids go to college. No jury wanted to convict her. And her lawyer said that at one time, they went to 6 trials in one day, and she was acquitted of all 6 of them. So that's Maggie Bailey.
Maggie Bailey, the original Teflon Don. What do you think, Darren? What do you think of the Maggie Bailey story?
6 trials in one day. I mean, she got the other amendment down, which is a right to a speedy trial. I mean, kudos to her attorney.
Yes. Apparently, the legal system was much more efficient back then. Drew, what'd you think?
I mean, if she's 95 years old, I mean, what's the point of putting her in prison at that point? So this sounds it sounds real, but then that could be just too good to be true. So
okay.
No.
All right, it's a tough call indeed. Well, let's hear the other stories first, and then we'll come back and figure out who we think is bluffing. So we're going to come out to Darren. Darren, you're going to come out, and you have 45 seconds for your conclusive round 3 story, and the floor is yours.
All right. It's November 19th, 1927, Stanford versus California. It's the 4th quarter, and the score is tied 6-6. Warner's Stanford team just got the ball back, and they've got one chance to break the tie and win the game before the time runs out. Quarterback Bill Hoffman takes the snap and fakes a handoff, hiding the ball behind his back. The defense buys it, even stepping out of his way, thinking he's just blocking for someone else. Hoffman runs untouched into the end zone for a touchdown. It's the first ever bootleg play in history, and Stanford wins the game 13-6. So why is it called a bootleg play? For the play to work, the quarterback hides the ball behind his leg or back, and Pop thought it looked like what a bootlegger would do when they hid a bottle of booze in their pants.
All right. The hidden ball trick. Melissa, what do you think of the conclusive story there for the Pop Warner story?
Yeah, it kind of fits really nicely. It sounds like a sports movie ending. It's almost like too good to be true. It's almost like a Hail Mary to try to save your story, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Nice. Well done. Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 13-6. That was a high scoring game there. I don't know what to think. It's definitely, there's a play called Bootleg. So, I mean, it had to start somewhere. So I guess this makes as much sense as any other story.
All right. Sounds like you're voting there. Okay, so we're going to move on. And Drew, we're actually going to keep you out. And you're going to have the 45 seconds to conclude your story for round 3. So here you are, Drew. The floor is yours.
Okay. Now, the Spencers, they weren't drinkers, but they also weren't naive. So they soon caught on to what the men were transporting and why they wanted to always park in the barn. They didn't want any trouble because they had grown accustomed to the nice flow of money. The New York crew didn't want to ruin a good thing either, so they struck a deal. The Spencers were provided a little extra compensation in exchange for their hospitality. As the mafia continued to use the Spencer Inn as a halfway point, they even started stashing shipments in the barn. One crew would drop off, and another crew would pick up. So they were more efficient. But all good things must come to an end. As the Great Depression began and the Prohibition ended, business was back to normal. Today, the Spencer Inn has been refurbished and renamed, and travelers can stay at the Bootlegger's Bed and Breakfast in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
The Bootlegger's Bed and Breakfast.
I'd stay
All right.
there.
Yes, it sounds appealing. Melissa, what do you think of the conclusion of Drew's third round story there?
Yeah, well, it started out kind of neat, but now I feel like it's a little on the rocks. What I'm thinking. Just because I feel like the Bootlegger's Bed and Breakfast doesn't pull in the same crowd that usually goes to bed and breakfasts. Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Darren, what do you think of Drew's story?
It sounds like a nice place to go and spend the night and maybe play cards. Maybe a game of gin or rummy.
There you go. Bubble. Okay. So we have take one more look at the Brown Tracker 9000. There it is above me. All 3 rounds, the dots in all 3 rounds are filled. So that means that all 9 round slots have been filled, meaning we have come to the point of the night where we have to figure out who is tonight's bluff. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the horn one more time and hear some final comments from each of our historians as to why they believe that one of their compatriots is telling the truth and the other one is bluffing. And then for those of you watching on YouTube, you have some time to comment now and put in some comments to let us know who you think might be the bluff. But I will start with Melissa. Melissa, let us know your theory. Who is tonight's bluff?
Yeah, so I had, there were both moments for both of the stories that I had suspicions. But I am actually going to go with Drew. Call me old-fashioned, but when I think of Prohibition, I don't think Kalamazoo.
Okay. Think more Manhattan.
Wow.
All right. Darren, what about you?
I'm starting to pucker from the taste of bad booze here. too many puns that you gotta mix those with something.
Oh, jeez.
I think they're both plausible, but I just can't picture this granny getting away with it for so long, and that's the one that I'm gonna have to go with. I'm picking Melissa.
Picking Melissa. All right, we have one vote for Drew, one vote for Melissa. Drew, it's time for you to take your shot. Who is the bluff tonight?
Well, in any competition, you win some, you lose some, right? And in this case, I could really just flip a coin. Is it Darren with the hidden ball trick? Is it Melissa with the 95-year-old moonshiner? And you know what? I know a lot about football, so I'm going to have to say that Melissa is the bluff.
All right, so we now have 2 votes for Melissa being the bluff, 1 vote for Drew being the bluff, and no votes for Darren being the bluff. So if Darren is indeed tonight's bluff, he has fooled everyone. I don't even know, so I'm going to throw it over to Adam. Adam, you're the one who knows. Let's find out who is tonight's bluff.
Okay, I'll have you step off the virtual stage, and you can splash something in your mouth to get that bitter's taste out of it, if you will, while I line up our compatriots of the evening. I'm going to reveal, was your bluff for this show about bootleg? Was it Melissa? Was it Darren? Or was it Drew? I will reveal now the bluff for this entire show. It was Drew. I wish I had another pun. I'm sure if I could think of it.
I wish you did too.
Oh,
yeah, you did that. That's very good. That's good.
Well done, everyone. All right. So, any final comments? Other than we might have broken our history bluff record for most puns in one show.
Quite possibly.
But thank you so much, Adam, for letting us have your time to run this thing again for us. Thank you to Melissa, to Darren and Drew, our historians. Thank you to those of you who were watching. Thank you to those of you who are listening on our podcast. And I'm going to hand it off to Adam to take us away to next week.
Let's do it. Don't forget to tune in. You can watch us on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and listen to our podcast where you get your podcast.